Professor Dr. Francis Obiora Ike, Executive Director, Global Ethics Net Foundation. Our guest trainers, Professor Muma Kisao, Chair, Kenya Association of Private Universities, and thank you, Prof, for supporting us this morning. My colleagues, Vice Chancellors of various universities, private and public, representatives of Vice Chancellors, representatives from various institutions of higher education and other and national institutions, the organizing committee of this training session led by Reverend Dr. Mbae, all our invited guests, the staff of the Catholic University of Eastern Africa, ladies and gentlemen, good morning, and welcome to the Catholic University of Eastern Africa. We are truly pleased to have you here this morning as you come to attend this very important workshop organized by the Global Ethics Net in collaboration with the Catholic University of Eastern Africa. Thank you all for coming. I am aware that some of you have traveled a long way to be able to come and participate in this workshop. This only serves to remind us all just how important it is, the work that we do to contribute to an ethical society. I welcome in a very particular way our guest trainers from Global Ethics Net Foundation who have traveled all the way from Geneva, Switzerland, and Arigato International, some of who have come from Sri Lanka. It is indeed a pleasure to have you with us this morning, and we all look forward to drinking from your deep wells of knowledge and experience. It gives me great pleasure to extend to you all a very warm welcome on behalf of the Catholic University of Eastern Africa management, staff, and students. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to briefly give you a background of how we have reached here. Global Ethics Net came into a cooperation agreement with the Catholic University of Eastern Africa in March 2011. The regional program named Global Ethics Net East Africa is hosted in the Center for Social Justice and Ethics at CUEA. And it covers the East African countries, economic community countries, namely Kenya, Tanzania, Uganda, Burundi, and Rwanda. Lots of activities have taken place in this region since then. In June last year, as co-founders with Global Ethics Net Foundation and other members, we launched the Global Ethics Consortium for Ethics in Higher Education in Geneva, Switzerland. The aim of this consortium is to promote ethical governance and leadership in higher education. As a matter of fact, the goal is to form a partnership with universities and colleges in order to support teaching and research in ethics, creating a framework of cooperation for equal opportunities and access to quality education around the world. This is in line with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goal number 4, as set by the UNESCO Framework for Action 2030. In this regard, I invite in a very special way my colleagues, the Vice Chancellors, to start thinking seriously about how we can partner to form a consortium of universities around the subject of ethics in this region. Ladies and gentlemen, the theme of our workshop and training, integrating ethics in higher education, is timely, as we reaffirm that universities play a key role in the formation and imparting of values to society. All universities in the world, and in particular the Catholic universities, have a role to play in the provision of quality education, which must not be devoid of ethics and values. For a university to grow, it needs to recognize the integral, constitutive role of ethics in the formation of flourishing community. This will not be easy unless the entire university community integrates ethics in all her activities. On this note, I wish to say that the agenda of the workshop covers a very critical area for us. But even before we talk about integrating ethics into higher education, we need to reflect on the importance of ethics itself in society. Immanuel Kant, that very famous German philosopher, is known to have said, in law, a man is guilty when he violates the rights of others. In ethics, he is guilty if he as much as thinks of doing so. Many times, people act out of routine or inclinations. Sometimes, we perform the right actions so as to achieve a goal, or so that something else may happen. According to Kant, this is a hypothetical imperative. And acting in this way does not amount to ethical behavior. In such a situation, one is acting legally, what Kant refers to as mere legality. That is, obeying the law because one is required to do so, and not because that act is good. Hence, acting in accordance to duty, but not from duty. Ethically, a person should act from duty. This means that one should do good as a duty. Kant calls this the categorical imperative. Therefore, to act ethically is to act according to the categorical imperative. This simply means doing good because it ought to be done. As staff and students in our institutions of higher learning, we should therefore strive for the categorical imperative. I remember making a presentation in this same hall 2 years ago at a conference, a seminar that had been called by Hekima, one of our constituent colleges. The theme was on justice and peace. And my presentation was on the importance of prioritizing the common good. And I remember how after 30 minutes of what I thought was a good presentation, a student sitting right in that corner, halfway, midway, in that corner, put up his hand and said, "Mwalimu, yes, all these things you say are very nice, but tell me, why do I have to do the common good? What is my obligation towards the common good?" At first I thought the student was joking, but I soon realized this is the question that we hear in ethics put in another way. When someone says, "Yes, but why do I need to be moral? Why should I be ethical? Especially when it does not benefit me." So getting a question like that from the university reminds us that we have much to do, even in these universities, to make people understand that it is in their interest to be good, to lead upright, morally upright lives. In the world today, many governments and educationists are greatly concerned about proliferation of societal ills such as corruption, and corruption is a very familiar situation with us. This morning the news said that 400 policemen have been sacked because they could not account for their wealth. How did they get that wealth? We all know what they earn. And so 400 of them have been sacked. We can only guess where it came from. Evils like violence, and violence is here with us, societal violence, violence in families, violence in the Amesea region, suicide, numerous forms of addictions, drug addictions and other kinds of addictions, child abuse, terrorism, disrespect for one another, just to mention a few of the ills that our society is having to cope with. All Amesea countries have performed consistently below average, less than 90 out of 180 on the Global Corruption Perception Index by Transparency International. Africa lost up to $1.4 trillion in illicit financial flows in the period between 1980 and 2009 alone, far exceeding money coming in over the same period, and seriously undermining the continent's development. Illicit financial flows involve the transfer of money earned through corruption, bribes, tax evasion, criminal activities, and transactions involving contraband goods. The current 10-year assessment threatens to be more shocking than what it has been before. Dr. Willy Mutunga, the former Chief Justice of Kenya, calls this kind of situation a bandit economy, where education and hard work do not count, but shortcuts, manipulation, and exploitation do. The situation is made worse by the fact that in some cases, an entire education system could be corrupted so that universities sell cheap diplomas and certificates, and the best academics move abroad. The level of academic integrity, such as the rules for reporting fraud, addressing misconduct, dealing with whistleblowers, is very many times wanting. The extent to which these rules are enforced is often influenced by extra educational considerations. It would seem, for instance, that if no case of plagiarism has been recorded, it is not because we are very ethical, but very often because plagiarism and the rules surrounding plagiarism have never been enforced. In other jurisdictions, doctoral students have filed legal complaints against their supervisor's failure to acknowledge their contributions, either in publications or in grant proposals. Charges of plagiarism have been brought against very senior academics across the globe, and you know those very well. It would also seem apparent that academic ethics is eroding because it is not taught and is not often contained in policy, is very often contained in policy documents that are rarely enforced. In our own small situations, and we know this has been a serious malady in this country, examination cheating at all levels of education, including universities, is rampant. When especially graduate programs fail to emphasize ethics, the result is skepticism about the necessity of learning ethics and, of course, of practicing it. In our own university, the Catholic University of Eastern Africa, we have under situations where sometimes we have to choose. The Faculty of Law, for example, was pressurized by the Council for Legal Education, CLE, to weed out as much as possible all the units that were perceived by CLE as non-legal units. The result was a dilemma for the faculty, because the university expects that every student in the university must take courses in ethics. And here now was the commission saying, no, you cannot teach ethics because ethics is not legal, it's not a legal unit. To scrape the mandatory Christian ethics from the law program or merge it with introduction to the Bible was the option, the dilemma. They did the latter, and we are yet to see what the impact of that will be on our students. In the circumstances, one cannot fail to conclude, at least in the interim, that nihilist philosophies such as anti-foundationalism are gaining currency within the academic environment itself and the regulatory agencies. This is progressively contributing to the neglect of ethics in education. And I want to say this with a lot of respect for public universities, that while private universities, and especially those faith-based institutions, take their ethics, morality, and values very seriously, while they try to incorporate their teaching ethics, it is not the case with our public universities, which universities seem to emphasize intellectual and academic achievement only. And I think it is for this reason that we must work together, both private and public universities, because we all understand that everyone requires ethics, and that we as institutions have the opportunity to influence behavior and influence the morality and values in the country. What they call the peripatetic university in the classic times has taught us a few things, including, for example, that the unexamined life is not worth living, and the fact that virtue is not something that we do when we feel like, or when once in a while, for whatever reason. That virtue, in fact, is a habit that is consciously chosen and formed and lived and perfected. The Platonic allegory of the cave, and this is my favorite, in philosophy, is my favorite allegory, or simile, or you might say parable, teaches us that the purpose of education and the end of education is not an individual thing. The benefits of education do not end with the individual. And that the person who has acquired an education cannot be said to be truly educated until that person gets down back to the cave for the purpose of saving others who have not reached the level that he or she has. And I think this is true of ethics as well. If we are truly educated, we must be ethical people. We must live upright, morally upright lives. But it is our duty then, because we are educated, to influence, to try to help others to also live that kind of life that is worthwhile. Our alumni, and I want to thank you very much for the message that you gave us this morning. We are very proud of you and of all our alumni, made reference to patristic education. And from here, I can see Professor Major where he's sitting. And this patristic education made a good case for social ethics by pronouncing themselves on property, poverty, or usury. Their teaching took to the form of coherent, discrete body of doctrines that remain relevant for us today. In these, our modern times, ethics links social justice to the structure of society and puts the pair at the heart of political thought. In the ancient world, social justice hardly played a role in ethics, which was rather concerned with how the individual could achieve happiness. After 55 years of education, of offering education in Kenya and teaching ethics and virtues in Kenya, Kenya's Ministry of Education and the Kenya Institute for Curriculum Development have come to the realization that the cure for all our societal ills lies not so much in teaching ethics or about ethics, but in providing a value-based education to counter the trend and achieve a society of human beings who have high regard for life and dignity of the human person, call to family, community, and participation, rights, and more importantly, responsibilities, option for the poor and vulnerable, the dignity of work and the rights of workers, solidarity, as well as the care for God's creation. As a university, we approve and support the effort that are being made by the ministry as they introduce these educational reforms. And we are ready to play our role through research, training, and collaboration with other institutions of higher education so as to achieve this goal. It is recognized that higher institutions of learning play a critical role in fostering students to not only be well educated, but also to be value-driven, first as citizens and then as leaders. In this regard, the responsibility rests on all academic institutions of higher learning to ensure that they abide by the highest ethical standards and that they build an ethos on their institutions among teachers, students, and administrators that inspires trust, credibility, and hard work. I know there are certain critics and certain skeptics of what an institution like ours can achieve in terms of ethics. A few years ago, the commission, I think it was the commission then, again, the Commission for Legal Education came visiting for an inspection. And we explained to them and we emphasized how much we value ethics and values and how we try to instill these to our students. And I remember one lady who was on the panel almost sarcastically saying, well, by the time you receive them at the university, if they are not formed ethically, what can you give them? And of course, you know, that's not completely irrelevant because the past and the youth of a person has a bearing on what kind of people they develop to be. Obviously, if they already have learned ethics and values in their youth before they come to the university, it helps. But if they have not, the opportunity is not altogether lost. And the universities must not lose the opportunity. Because part of being ethical has to do with the presence or absence of ignorance in our lives. Sometimes we are unethical because we do not know. And the role of the university is to remove that ignorance from the student, to help the student by taking away the ignorance so that they have an opportunity from an informed point of view to choose what kind of life they want to live. So, what we do in the university is crucial. It is important for the young people that we have been charged with, whose responsibility we take. In the coming days, starting right now, we are going to draw from the wealth of knowledge and experience of our respected facilitators. The goal of this workshop is, inter alia, to strengthen the ethical practices and reputation of QUER. This will be achieved by supporting efforts to integrate more fully value-based decision-making processes in governance, management, and daily practices of staff, management, and leadership. It is also geared towards strengthening the professional ethical awareness and providing support to teaching staff to help them to be adequately equipped to teach ethical values. Of course, when we talk about teaching, that could be misleading. So people say, oh, no, I don't teach them, so I have nothing to do with these people. And I want to say the teaching we are talking about, teaching of ethics, is not necessarily a formal thing in a classroom situation. that all of us are teachers of values. It has to do with ourselves being models, offering examples that others can emulate. And all of us interact with students, whether we teach them or we just come across them on the corridors or we give them service. We can teach something by the way we serve them, because they want to know what kind of, do we respect them? How do we treat other human beings? So we must not be misled to think that what we are talking about here is only formal teaching in the classroom. A teacher may never use the word ethics or even say, I'm now teaching you ethics. But the students are learning all the time. And sometimes they are learning negative, the opposite of what we really should be teaching them. It also aims at integrating ethical reflection and action in research, ensuring that research goals are beneficial and that the means are not harmful. Finally, it also aims at raising the awareness of policy makers and stakeholders in Kenya about the need to integrate value-based policies in education and in research. The intervention is consistent with the vision of our founders. When Mbae founded the new Catholic University of Eastern Africa, they must have had in mind the transformation of society through evangelization. Transformation begins first with the individual and personal conversion. It begins with an awareness of ad intra, then challenge to pursue conversion ad extra. When in 2003, the Center for Social Justice and Ethics was founded in Kwea, the bishops were affirming what they had always held, that working for social transformation and liberating people from all sorts of oppressive structures is an intrinsic component of the gospel. If Kwea is in the business of producing transformative leaders, because that's what we say, and this is what our mission is, to produce morally upright, transformative leaders, if we are in that business for church and society, then ethics must be an intrinsic component. In a sense, we undertake to form the conscience of those we teach, challenge them to liberate themselves from the warped value system that the society so often presents, and offer a more humane and ethical vision of society. I therefore invite all of you to take this opportunity to benefit from the resource persons who are here present with us today. In a very special way, I invite those who will be trained as trainers to take their training very seriously, because going forward, you will be required to cascade the training to the other faculty members and students in the entire university, and not only the university, but also help other universities in the country and in the region. With these not so few words, I now wish to declare the workshop on integrating ethics in higher education officially, but officially open.